Hello everyone, I'm John Evans, and welcome to another episode of One on One. Beth Troutman walked away. She had a great job anchoring newscasts in the largest television market in North Carolina. But something was missing, and Beth had to go and find it. During her career, Beth has held many high-profile jobs. She's hosted nationally syndicated television shows, she's anchored newscasts, and she had 4 appearances at the North Carolina Azalea Festival, including Queen Azalea in 2018.
Out of the blue, I was absolutely blown away. I was speechless when I got that phone call, and I knew that it was someone who worked with the Azalea Festival. I didn't know what the call was going to be about, and when they asked me to actually be Queen Azalea, my first reaction was I wasn't really able to form the correct words because I had, my first Azalea Festival was 1988 when I was, 10 years old or 11 years old. And I thought that Queen Azalea was the most amazing person I had ever met up until that point, and I thought it was an incredible thing, to get to be the Azalea Queen. And so in 2018, fast forward 30 years, when suddenly I was added to that list of really impressive women, really amazing people who have been Queen Azalea in the past, I was blown away. I was so humbled by it because I was so not expecting it.
Do you remember what you performed back in 1988?
I do. My brother and I, my older brother, his name is Brandon, we used to sing together. We were like the young version of Donnie and Marie. We did a medley of songs called Here's to the Ladies that had all kinds of different songs from the late 70s and early 80s. And then we performed a Motown medley, and I think a medley of dance songs too, like songs from like Dirty Dancing and any songs that had the word dance in them. So we did a bunch of medleys that we had choreographed, and we had matching costumes. I mean, we were dorks.
Was there anything any better as a 10 or 11-year-old girl at that point in time to be with the Azalea Festival?
No, I can't think of anything better. That year, Kim Morgan Green was the queen. She was a soap opera star. She was the star of the show The Colbys at the time. Spencer Christian, who was the weatherman from Good Morning America, he was there. There was an actress from the TV show Head of the Class. I mean, so here I was, this special guest as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, with all of these people who were these, in my mind, huge celebrities. And we were all celebrating together and celebrating the community together and celebrating springtime together. And so that set the tone for me for what the Azalea Festival was. I mean, just this huge celebration and coming together of really impressive people from all over the country, and then all of these really amazing people who were there in the community. And that was, so for me, the Azalea Festival was the coolest thing ever.
Did you ever get a chance to come back in between the performing year and this year as Queen?
Yes, I did. I was back in 1997. I was on the Queen's Court. And then I was on the Queen's Court again in 1999 when Sydney Penny was the Azalea Queen, who now lives there in the Wilmington area. So I think the committee this year told me that I was the first Azalea Queen to have ever actually also served on the Queen's Court, which was kind of cool. Yeah. So I had some really amazing experiences with the Azalea Festival. Again, though, I never imagined that in 2018 I would be back as the Queen.
Let's fast forward then. Your time out here, I know we met at the gala, but I had told you then that I had, seen your work, and actually you were covering a Cooper McCrory debate at UNC TV that I covered. We kind of converged there in Raleigh at that time. But take me back now to getting into Wilmington and your 3 or 4 days reigning as Queen. You told me that Saturday night it was kind of like a whirlwind, but you've had a couple of weeks now to kind of look back on it.
It's really incredible what the organization does and what the board does and the president does to put that event together is nothing short of remarkable. I got to Wilmington on Monday, actually, that April 9th, and I surprised everybody on the committee by coming to their big meeting on Monday night and came in and took pictures and, talked to everybody and got to see some people, I hadn't seen since I was at the festival in 1999. One lady that I recognized, I had met when I was 5 years old at an event, and I saw her, and she clicked into my brain immediately, which was incredible. And then I went to dinner with the board and got to experience some yummy Wilmington food, and then did the official portrait on Tuesday morning in the freezing cold pouring rain, which was hilarious. But then right from that moment, they took me into the park where I got to do my handprints in the cement.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that I got to do that was something that I was going to do or get to do. And it made me cry. I'm not sure why I got so emotional about it, but putting my hands in the cement with a little placard with my name and the year, to me, was just the coolest thing ever. And then, just getting to spend time with the people in Wilmington on that particular day before I was actually part of the coronation, or I hadn't been crowned yet, was actually really, really lovely. And then, as the festival just opened, and I was with the Coast Guard on Wednesday morning, and then after the coronation, it was unbelievable how they put you in a limousine and you have a police escort, and I'm wearing this crown that women had worn for decades, each year. And then the garden party was so incredible. But Blair Elementary School, I think that may have been just the highlight of being queen. We arrived, and the students were out there with all of these beautiful signs and these bow ties and these corsages that they had made, and they had decorated all of their bulletin boards. And I got to speak with the students and got to kind of address them, and then walk through the halls with them as they handed me this huge basket of gifts. And going through that, I didn't get to go through the basket until I got home, days after. And it was just everything. They were so thoughtful. Everything that they put in that basket was so lovely and so thoughtful. And I had all these pictures and letters drawn by the kids. And I'll tell you, something like that moves you more than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And then the parade itself was so much fun. There was such a huge crowd there. But the fact that the president had a military flyover in the square as I came through, I started sobbing again. I think I was like this emotional wreck. I was so moved by how much work went into it.
Yeah.
My husband is an event planner, so I know how much goes into planning even small events. So something to this scale, just the fact that committee and the groups of people and all of the volunteers and the board, that they come together and put something like the Azalea Festival and all of those little details into it. It's remarkable. So now processing it, I can't believe that I was lucky enough to experience the festival from the position of being the queen and what it feels like to be treated like royalty. I can only imagine that what Queen Elizabeth must feel like every single day, because I kind of felt like I got a few days of it myself.
Yeah, and you're not getting married, but a royal wedding. Think of everything that goes into something like that. You have several million people wanting to know your every move.
Right. I mean, and I can only imagine, because I experienced it on the tiny, on a small scale, not the billions. How many people did they say watched the royal wedding? Like 2 billion, a billion people or something? Crazy.
Yeah, and you mentioned the kids, and I mean, having been in some of the positions you worked at news stations, you do school visits, on a fairly regular basis, and you talk to kids, and some of the ones that I've done, when even going to a school and reading a book, you get the most out of those kind of events than you do speaking to a group of adults somewhere.
Well, there's something so special about getting to connect with young people, because they are still so open to possibilities, and they're so open to ideas, and they're still, figuring themselves out and figuring the world out and figuring their place in the world out. And so there's an opportunity in that to have an impact. And there's so much responsibility in that, but there's something so special about it, because you get to give so much love and share words of kindness, and then hopefully help impact the people, the adults that they're going to become, because one little thing can change the way that a child thinks about the world and thinks about other people. And when you have the opportunity to be a person who can be a force, it's a huge responsibility, but oh my gosh, such an honor. And so that, being there at Blair, and then also at the Boys and Girls Club, those were just such special moments because I got to connect with these young people who were just lovely. Oh my gosh, so lovely, so
Yeah.
lovely.
You get so much inspiration from the children in the smallest thing, like a gift from their heart.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yes.
yeah. What was Beth like growing up in Concord, North Carolina? You told me you entertained, so you had to take maybe some singing and dancing lessons. But what was a young Beth like growing up?
I was kind of a nerd. I've always been a little bit dorky and I mean that in in really good ways. I always loved school. I was a bit of a tomboy because I only had brothers, so I had to be I had to learn how to ride dirt bikes and four-wheelers and three-wheelers just so I could keep up with my brothers because we didn't live in a neighborhood. We lived in a space where we didn't have other kids to play with, so I had just my brothers, and that was it. But I loved reading, and I loved school, and I started doing like public speaking competitions when I was in 6th or 7th grade, and I was in the band. I was the conductor of the chorus, just really loved being involved, and I was a waitress at my family's barbecue restaurant in town,
Nice.
and still I waited tables there for so long that I still, when I go in there to have lunch or dinner every now and again, I still see some of my regulars that I had, and I can still remember what they ordered and how they ordered it. And it's so crazy. I don't know their names sometimes. I'm like, oh yeah, your hamburger with mustard on both sides of the bread.
That's funny how those little memories kind of stick in the back of your mind. You have something in common with both of my daughters. You all three went to UNC Chapel Hill.
Ah, so
Um,
they're geniuses too.
they are, and they're much smarter than their father is. Believe you me. What was your thought going into UNC Chapel Hill? What did you want to do? Did you have a direction at that point in time?
And UNC Chapel Hill was the only school in North Carolina that I applied to. My one of my theories in life is to never have a plan B because you'll use it. Because if you have a plan B, you're already thinking about failure. So I was just planning on heading to UNC if I was going to stay in the state of North Carolina. And I didn't at the time know exactly what I wanted to major in. I was thinking about journalism when I first got to UNC, and I took that, the dreaded spelling and grammar test
Sure.
my freshman year and passed it when I took it, which I was really excited about. And originally thought that that's what I was going to do, but I was fulfilling a perspective, just one of the cultural diversity classes that you needed to take in
Yeah.
order to graduate in I guess it might have been my sophomore year. I'd already declared one of my majors as political science because I was always fascinated by politics. But I ended up not declaring journalism, and I ended up getting a degree in women's studies. And that was because of that random cultural diversity class that I took. And I ended up combining the two, political science and women's studies, with this focus on feminist political theory, which terrified my parents. They were like, what kind of job are you going to get with that degree? And I was like, whatever kind of job I want, guys. It was such a brilliant new language almost for me because suddenly I was reading these authors who were articulating my feelings, but I didn't have the words yet for what it was like to grow up as a woman in the South and as a woman who, I grew up in a beauty pageant culture as well. And I had these different feelings about that, but I didn't know how to articulate what I wanted to really be and how I wanted to make a mark in the world as a woman and how I wanted to take up space as a woman and find my own voice as a woman and be successful and kind of break some of those stereotypes and try to really make a difference. And that degree is actually the thing that inspired me more than and probably helped define me more than anything. So going into Chapel Hill, I didn't know what I was going to become, and that degree kind of helped shape what I became.
And obviously, you had a love of politics, political science as a major, and you ended up running for Congress in 2004. I want to talk about that in a second. But you said you liked politics. What drove you? I mean, was it just local elections at home or living near Charlotte? There's never a lack of political controversy in that city, so that may have drawn it too.
That's absolutely true. There's never a lack of political controversy here. In ninth grade, I had a teacher for a class called Economics and Political Law, EPL. Mr. Hart, and he made sure every day that we spent the first 20 minutes of class discussing current events. So we had to read the Charlotte Observer or the Concord Tribune or both. Back then you didn't have the internet. You couldn't go online and read stories. So I actually would read the paper in the morning so that we could discuss these things in class. And that was the 92 election, which was the Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush election. And I got hooked in that class, 14 years old, listening to this teacher. He was just brilliant and funny and fun, and he made politics seem so interesting. And then because I was paying attention to that election, I was just blown away by it. And then right after Bill Clinton won and was inaugurated that summer, I got to meet him in the Oval Office. I had won a scholarship and got to have a one-on-one meeting with him in the Oval Office.
Wow.
And that helped define things for me too. And the funny thing was, in very Beth fashion, I say I'm a dork, I tripped on the carpet on the way into the Oval Office.
Oh, no.
I walked in and just kind of stumbled my way up to him, and I started laughing, and I said, "Hi, my name's Beth." And he said, "Hey, my name's Bill." I was like, "Yeah, I know." My face was blood red, but that meeting was so fantastic.
You realize how valuable that is. I mean, how many people in the United States get a chance to even tour the White House, and you get the opportunity not only to walk into the Oval Office, but to meet the President of the United States at 14.
I know. And I can't, again, there are so many things that have happened in my life that have been by chance or, just by sheer determination, or just because I happened to apply for a scholarship, not knowing what was going to happen in the future. And the fact that those kinds of things, those opportunities presented themselves, that to me now, and it's funny, there's a saying, youth is wasted on the young. And there's some truth to that, because you can't appreciate things in the moment because you don't know yet how special they are, because you don't have enough perspective to know how special they are. But I do remember after I met him, there was an episode of, I'm showing my age, obviously. I mean, Beverly Hills 90210 was a big show at the time.
Yeah.
And there was an episode where Brandon, the main character, got to go meet the president, and it was, this big deal on the show. And this was shortly after I had met the president. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I did that.
Yeah.
And I think that was the weird thing that put it into perspective for me.
After graduating UNC Chapel Hill, you met another president. He happened to be Martin Sheen. But that series of circumstances still is really kind of amazing how all that played out. You wanted to go out there, I guess, to try to get into acting, really, right?
No, I didn't. It wasn't about being in front of the camera at that time. Part of my senior project, one of my senior projects as I was getting my degree in women's studies, was on images of women in media and how those images affect self-esteem, particularly body image in young girls. And so at 22, when I was graduating, I thought that if I was going to have an impact on how the image of women is put out there, that I just needed to go change Hollywood. So easy at 22,
sure,
right? Just
why
go
not?
change Hollywood, no big deal. And The West Wing started its first season in my final semester at UNC. And that show was so brilliant. Not only was it a political show, which I loved politics, but it also had these really interesting, very powerful female characters who weren't the traditional cookie cutter women. Allison Janney was so cool, 6 feet tall. And
CJ,
yeah. Yes, played CJ Craig. And so I thought, I'm just going to learn from these guys. If I'm going to learn how to really do Hollywood right and change Hollywood, I'm going to learn from the best in the business. And again, I always say never have a plan B, because you'll use it. I packed up my car and drove to LA after graduating from UNC, and did not apply for the show until I got to LA. I bought a fax machine. I was staying at the Hollywood Ramada, which I don't recommend to anyone, and cold faxed my resume. And by chance, the woman who was hiring for a production assistant position was standing at the fax machine just by chance when my resume came through.
Wow.
And she noticed my resume because she had also gotten a degree in political science. She was also from the East Coast. And she told me later that she noticed my resume because I didn't have any grammatical errors in my cover letter.
Let that be a lesson to every college student out there right now. Hit spell check or look it over before you send things.
Exactly, because it can make a huge difference. And she luckily called me about 2 hours after I faxed my resume, only resume I faxed. And I went in the next day for an interview, and I started the next week as a production assistant, behind the scenes, which is the lowest rung on the ladder of television production. But got my foot in the door and worked 20-hour days and, got coffee for everybody. And then I met one of the directors that season was doing an episode. It was the third episode of the second season. So people who are fans of the show, you know which episode I'm talking about. There was this whole scene on like religious hypocrisy and the respect of the president or respecting the president. And I barged into the director's office and I was like, you know what? There are millions of people who need to see this episode, particularly this scene. So do a good job. And everybody was like, Beth, you are a production assistant. You're not supposed to just barge into the director's office and talk to him. But the next day, our first Emmy nominations for that first season, which, we got like 22 or 21 or 22 that year, came in. And so they had this big like sushi party down on the set to celebrate, and the production assistants were invited. So I was standing, on the set kind of shyly with all the other production assistants. And that director came up to me and he stuck his hand out and he said, I'm Alex Graves, and you are?
Excited that you remembered me. That's who I am.
Yeah. And then at the end of that season, he was asked to come on as a staff director and producer of the show. And so I cold called him and said, I'm that blonde girl, that barged into your office last season or last year, and I would really love to work for you. And then he had me fax him my resume, and then I started with him as his assistant, which put me in like getting a master's degree in production, because I would be in the writer's room. I would be on set helping him block the scenes. I would be on set with him while he was shooting the scenes. I would be in the editing room while he was editing, and then would see the final product before it went out to air on NBC. And that was, such valuable information. But I was never, when I was out there, I wasn't planning on being in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. I was planning on developing TV shows and developing characters with very, very strong female lead characters. You
and I have something in common. Martin Sheen, he campaigned for you when you ran for Congress in 2004. Martin Sheen delivered the commencement address at my small school called King's College in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, the year after I graduated. And I always looked up to him. I just thought that he was just. I've always wanted to kind of, if he was ever doing a satellite tour, I've always wanted to get those interviews and never have had the opportunities. One person I would love to meet in my lifetime. But what was it like for him to come and campaign for you when you're running for Congress in 2004?
Oh my gosh. The President Bartlett, that character was so incredible. But I will tell you, Martin Sheen, as a person, is incredible. He's so kind and so generous and so thoughtful, and just so giving of his time, obviously, if he was willing to fly across the entire country. And he spent 3 days on the campaign trail with me in a car, just driving to small cities. I was District 8, which ran from, at the time, Mecklenburg County all the way to Cumberland County. And we had a couple of different campaign stops, one in Charlotte, and then we did one in Rockingham. I can't remember. The third one, we actually came up to Raleigh and did a little fundraiser together. And he was so kind about it, and he didn't complain about being in the car or having to eat drive-through Burger King sandwiches or staying in hotels that were certainly not the Ritz-Carlton or anything like that. He was just, it was incredible that he believed in me enough to come and give of his time and his energy. And the people at the West Wing were so supportive, because it was not my plan at 27 to run for the U.S. House. It was a phone call from the DCCC asking if I would run. I was in my office at the West Wing when they asked me. And, my first instinct was to say, I don't work in the real White House, right? That this is.
How did they discover you? How did they know about you?
Well, it turned out they were trying to find a candidate to run, and they had reached out to my father, who ran for the North Carolina House in the 90s.
Okay.
And my dad made a joke about it and said, somebody like my daughter would be way better at this than I would, because I'm at that point, my dad, I think, he must have been in his early 60s or late 50s, and he was the same age as the guy who was already in office from the district, and they're from the same hometown. He's like, I'm basically the same person. Why would anybody make a change? And, made the joke about me. And I guess they did a little research, and they found me in my office and called me. And I went to one of our producers after I got that phone call, and somebody that I trusted, and I told him that I had gotten this phone call asking if I'd run for the U.S. House and wondered if I should do it. And he looked at me and said, Beth, you know what? People don't get those phone calls. So even if you only get 5 votes, yes, you
Sure.
should do it.
You got 45% of the vote, though.
I did. I
And I mean,
did.
did you ever after that want to try to do it again?
Um, it always hits me every election cycle. I think about it because I've obviously been involved. Once I started working in television after the political campaign, I ended up in front of the camera. I was
Hmm.
constantly talking about politics, so I was always really engaged. The issue was I was the first woman to ever run in the 8th district, and one of the youngest federal candidates that year, that election season, and I was running against an incumbent whose son I dated in high school, which a
Oh,
lot of people didn't know.
wow. Robin, you dated Robin Hayes' son?
I dated Robin Hayes' son in high school.
Wow.
He was a senior when I was a freshman, so my incumbent's youngest child was 3 years older than I was.
Oh, wow.
So I
Could have used
knew
you could have
Rob.
used that on the campaign if you felt like it, I guess.
Well, I liked Robin. I really did, and still do. And I
Hmm.
had actually been at a fundraiser for him when he ran for governor in '96. I've known him my entire life, so every time I saw him at an event, I'd hug him, which I think threw him off a little bit. But we still are in touch. We still
Nice.
talk to each other, and he's a really lovely person.
Yeah.
Um,
What what
but
what pushed you in front of the camera then? You went to WCCB in Charlotte after that. Yeah, I guess you obviously had some journalistic chops for them to take a chance on you.
I don't know why they took a chance on me. Looking back now, what happened was I didn't have a plan B. I was just campaigning and thinking, okay, I'm going to do this and hopefully I end up in Congress. So after the election, I was unemployed. I didn't
Yeah.
I didn't want to move back to Hollywood because then I was going to be the carpetbagger that, everyone on the campaign trail said that I was. So I was online one day and saw that WCCB, which was at that time Fox Charlotte, was looking for an opinionated female. I thought,
Oh
well, I
wow.
could, I
They
could
should
do
have just
that.
they should have just reached out to you by phone, I guess, right?
Well, I called them. I called the news director, and the receptionist, told him Beth Troutman was on the phone, and he had paid attention to the campaign, so he actually took my call.
Nice.
And he answered the phone and said, "Oh, the girl who's too Hollywood to win a congressional election. Why are you calling me?" And I was really honest with him. I was like, you know what? I need a job. And I heard you need an opinionated female. And I came in for an interview and they threw me live on the air that night for a half an hour opinion show. And I had no
Wow.
idea what I was doing. First time I'd ever read a teleprompter. I got on the set and the floor director asked me if I had my IFB. And I said to him, like, I would tell you if I knew what that was. So they gave me, one of those like
Yeah.
little teardrop ones that don't stay in your
Right.
ear.
No, yeah. Everybody wonders why you keep putting your hand
Right.
up to your ear. It's like I'm not doing my Gary Edwards laugh-in imitation. I have to actually put this thing in my ear, people. That's why I'm doing this.
Because it keeps popping out
Yeah.
and you can't hear the director or the producer then. And I guess, that must have gone well because they came back to me and they said that they were relaunching their morning show and they wanted me to come in and be their morning show host. And I said yes, and I knew that I would figure it out on the hot seat and figure. And the thing that was really interesting to me about that job was that I was going to continue being able to communicate with my constituents, the people I had campaigned for that entire election cycle. And they allowed me at Fox to be opinionated, which is what they said that they wanted. And so I got to have really intense conversations about politics. I even did debates with who later became governor, Pat McCrory. He was the mayor of Charlotte and would come in and we would do debates against each other, which
Sure.
was a ton of fun.
Ah,
And so that for me was just kind of an extension of the political campaign. And then also this bizarre extension of everything that I had learned at the West Wing as well. And so I thought as being a TV host in this new role I was in, that I was also going to be able to take all of those ideas of changing the images of women on television. I was going to be now that person and see what I could do. And sometimes it's weird. I didn't have a plan to be on TV. My plan was just I wanted to affect change.
right.
And oddly here I was, and I suddenly became a TV host. And then that just kept growing and expanding, and it turned into a career.
You went to Lifetime TV. You went to Right This Minute, which I still think is one of the coolest shows on television. And I told you
Thank you.
that
I did the
Saturday night.
pilot for that show.
Yeah, I still think that's one of the coolest shows on television because it literally is like YouTube and Twitter and everything wrapped up into one. New videos that nobody's ever seen. But then you went back and you did some work at WCNC as an anchor person. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, the opinionated show that you were in first, and then being a nighttime anchor at a television station where you've got to be objective in your coverage. Mm-hmm. I think that the lines now are so blurred in this country over journalism versus the opinion shows. Did you have a difficult time doing one after the other?
I did, actually. I was surprised when they reached out, WCNC reached out to me out of the blue. I had been at Right This Minute for 4 years. I was the lead host. I was doing the Today Show. I was living the dream in a television career. I had a national show and was doing a lot of fun work. And I mentioned this to you before. My mother had ovarian cancer, mm-hmm. and so when they reached out to me, which Charlotte, Concord, it's my hometown, it allowed me to stay in the industry and also be there for my mother. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. It was listening to my heart. It wasn't a career move necessarily. It was more of a heart move.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to get a lot of time with my mother. And my mother's diagnosis was not great. The doctors didn't have anything else left to do to help treat her cancer about 4 months after I got back here. And so I took this position that was very difficult for me because Right This Minute was an ad lib show. There was no script, no teleprompter, nothing. It was just personality and just my own thoughts. And suddenly here I was in this space where you're right, you do have to be objective, and you're just basically reading a teleprompter, which is often not your words. It's a producer's words. It's somebody else's writing. And the thing that I couldn't do well, I couldn't disconnect from the information. And I was heartbroken every single day because the majority, and you know this, you've worked in the news, a lot of what you end up talking about, and in Charlotte, we talked about it a great deal, was crime and car wrecks and a lot of things that to me, I couldn't stop thinking about the people who were affected by it. I couldn't stop thinking about, after my 30-second VO was done, these people had to keep, leading their lives with this, tragedy that was life-changing for them. And it was really impacting me and impacting my emotions in a very, very negative way. And I would go to my general manager, and she knew me really well, and of course knew that I had come from opinion television and from, personality-driven television. And we kept having really honest conversations about it. And after my mother passed away, I was my mother's caretaker. I actually took a few weeks off of the anchor desk and took care of my mother as she left this world. And that changes you. When you watch someone die, I was holding my mother's hand when she took her final breath. It changes you, and it really does put things into perspective even more. Mm-hmm. And I think when I got back to the anchor desk, I knew that I wasn't aligned with my purpose any longer. This person who wanted to do a lot of good in the world. And I just went to them and I was really honest about it and said, I don't think that I'm the right person for this role. I think that there are other people who are better at this than I am. I think that there's somebody else who wants to be a news anchor, and I don't. This isn't the right kind of position for me. And they were really supportive and lovely about it, which I'm so grateful for because the industry. Most people don't walk away from jobs.
And you don't walk
the main anchor.
Yeah, you don't walk away and not end up paying out of your own pocket. I mean, some of the things we're seeing across the country now of anchors being, told to say something and they can't not say something or else they're going to break a non-compete. And the people at home and the viewers and the people who read blog posts have no earthly idea what non-compete and damages and all that stuff is like.
Right.
It's if you're a real human being with a family, you can't afford to take those chances. You really truly were lucky, I guess, and knowing you, I know it's not luck. It's really God's grace giving you that opportunity.
Sure.
Because you said, I feel like I'm being called to do something with new meaning, and I told God I would listen. Those were your words that night you said you were leaving.
Yeah, and thank you for even listening to that. Thank you. That shows that you are great at your job, that you did that kind of research and saw that night. And that's the truth. I had to listen, and I promised God that I would listen, and I took this chance of jumping without a parachute. Just assuming that a parachute would open, and by chance, I had already met some folks who created an organization called Give Hope Global. I'm actually wearing one of their T-shirts right now.
See that?
And I ended up going to Haiti. It was the first thing that I did. I, walked away from this high-profile job, and people thought I was crazy. I mean, a lot of people said to me, "How are you doing this? Why would you do this? You're walking away from this amazing job that people fight to get, and you're just willing to walk away without a plan." And my plan was to get back to me, to get back to that place that I knew that I had lost. And I realized it after watching my mother and some of the conversations I had with my mother as she was dying. And so here I am in Haiti, third world country, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, working at an orphanage. And that changed my DNA. I was suddenly living exactly what I had learned from my mother, that love is really the only thing that matters, because I'm in this country where people have, nothing compared to the material goods that we have here in America. And yet they were so full of joy and gratefulness and just happiness and love and kindness. And watching that, really just solidified what my heart, I think, already knew. And I think that was what God probably had in mind for me, was to get me to a place where I really understood priorities. And when I shot actually a short documentary, a series of short documentaries while I was there, to help the organization raise money. That was the goal, to help them tell their story of the amazing work that they were doing there, and to help them raise money so they could continue doing that work. And that documentary, I spent years and years and years in front of the camera telling stories in the ways that people told me to tell them, because you're under contract and you do what you're told to do. And then suddenly I did this thing, just, no makeup, just sweaty, hadn't showered, just emotional in Haiti in front of the camera, just trying to tell the story of this work that's being done. And suddenly I was nominated for 4 Emmys.
Yeah. Who'd have thought?
Crazy.
Tell
Which
me
again, I call those God winks. That's God just saying, see, if you listen, if you just pay attention, I promise I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'll let you know that you're on the right track.
There's also something called the real smile. You smile when you get a good grade. You smile when you come off a stage after entertaining. You smile when you graduate. You smile when you get a job on the West Wing. You smile when you get those calls. You smile when you nail that VO and hit that soundbite, or you get out at 6:27:55 like you should. Yeah. But then you find your position in life, and it's the real smile. And it seems to me like you have that real smile as opposed to the ones you had in your headshots and on West Wing and everything else like that.
Oh, thank you. That's a very gracious thing for you to say, and I certainly appreciate that. That's it makes my heart very happy that you see that. It feels that way, it feels. In the last year, since I walked away from a television career and spent time in Haiti, and then came back and suddenly started being asked to speak at events. The first one was a women's event in Union County. And then from that, just being asked over and over to come and just tell my story and everything that I've learned. I've in that process gotten to really meet myself, nobody else's version of
Sure.
me, nobody telling me how blonde my hair needs to be, or how long or how short, or what makeup, or how much I should weigh, or all of those things that become part of your life when you have it. When you have a television career, sometimes your appearance becomes more important than your words or your personality or what you say. And as a woman, that was really a huge pressure and heartbreaking for me, having a women's studies degree, suddenly battling that as well. And in this year, I've gotten to really just meet myself. And I wrote an article. I went to this women's empowerment camp called Camp Empowerment. They have them in different places across the country. And a woman who used to be a producer for the Today Show created it. She left TV to follow her calling and her heart. And I ended up writing an article about it for Shondaland, Shonda Rhimes' website. And I kind of wrote it about this experience I had there where I realized that the real version of me is this very happy person, this very kind of bubbly person. I described my soul as feeling kind of like champagne bubbles, not drunk, but the
Sure.
bubbles.
No, yeah, the effervescence, as it were.
Effervescence, I guess. And I hadn't ever really gotten to experience that because of, I guess, the pressures of what I was experiencing career-wise. And I think that was probably the point. And I think that was what I meant when I promised God I would just listen, because I think that was where I needed to be, is at a place where that felt comfortable, so that I could then be more comfortable sharing that story with other people. And hopefully, and the goal now for me is to help other people get to that place themselves, because I've seen what life can look like and feel like when you live from that place, when you're not so focused on, the getting more, getting that next thing, or, there's something that's far more rewarding on the other side of all of that if you just get past the fear of it. And I had to do it myself in order to be able to share what that's like to help other people get there.
You're focused now on a new series of documentaries, Live Life Forward?
That's one of the things that I'm working on now. Yes, there's a production company that actually does the show that I did for Lifetime that does a show called Live Life Forward. And the concept is to highlight people who are doing good, people who are choosing kindness. And there's something really rewarding about that. And then I have some other projects that I can't talk about yet, but that are in my mind and in the works that are similar, in thought, in just promoting all of the people, because there's so many people on this planet who are trying so hard to do the right thing and to do good and to really affect other people, which is really what we're put here for, to really have an impact.
Well, you're joining me on this podcast, but you also have Hope Dealers podcast.
You really did your research.
I would be slack if I didn't.
You're so good at your job. We've only done 6 episodes. Another motivational speaker, a guy that actually was a guest on Right This Minute years ago, he and I reconnected, about a year ago, just by chance. Again, by chance. Sometimes you just got to answer the phone, or answer an email.
Yeah.
And we had this idea to talk about positive things, people who have overcome adversity and have found grace in it, have found kindness in it, and, have let go of anger and blame and judgment, and instead have turned something negative into something really positive. And it's been really amazing, because the guests that we've had on the show have been so lovely. People who have overcome addiction, people who have overcome paralysis. I mean, who have dealt with a debilitating accident and have found so much joy and positivity in something like that. And when you hear those stories, you can't help but feel hopeful.
Yeah. When there's a lot of young ladies who are coming off college campuses this time of year, they're going out to try to get jobs, maybe in something they want to do, but they may have to take a job in something they don't want to do. You have, in the short time that I have known you and researched you, you are like the professional at putting that one foot in front of the other, even though you may not be able to see the sidewalk or the hard ground there. Something's going to be there. What's your advice for a young woman who's coming off a college campus right now and doesn't know what they want to do with the rest of their life?
My advice is to remember that things will come to you that are difficult. Things are going to happen in your life that are tough. You may have to work a job that it doesn't feel perfect, that doesn't feel right in that moment, but there's a reason for it. And the way to be successful at life is really about perspective. It's how you respond to the things that happen in your life, and everything will lead to something else. And sometimes that first job that is kind of in the field that you want to be in, or kind of something that you're interested in, is really about being an opportunity that trains you, that gives you some piece of information or some piece of learning, some piece of life experience that you might need for really living out your purpose. And there is something that's really fun and amazing about living on the edge in faith, like you say, knowing that you're going to take that step and the sidewalk will come up to meet you. There's something so much there. It is really so fun and exhilarating to live life in that way, rather than thinking that you have to have everything completely planned out, because as you well know, life is what happens while you're making other plans. The best plans never quite work out the way that you want them to. So if you're living with this idea that life is an adventure, and that fear is there sometimes to let you know, this is what I believe, that it's there sometimes to let you know what you really want. Because usually when your fear gets really strong and that evil roommate in your head starts talking really, really loudly, that's usually a sign that there's something you really want there. And I say, go for it. Tell that evil roommate to shut up, and, plow through that fear, because there is, on the other side of it, laughter and happiness. And even if the experience isn't perfect in that moment, it is actually perfect for where you're headed. And having that perspective will allow you to kind of let go of the pressure of needing to know everything right now and know exactly what you want to be right now. Just to know that everything has its purpose. I remember being 25 years old and sitting at the West Wing and thinking, I turned 25 and thinking, oh my gosh, Orson Welles had written, directed, and starred in Citizen Kane at 25. And what am I doing? I'm getting Rob Lowe coffee. I'm not. And I wish, the 41-year-old me could go back to that place and just say, hey, you're doing okay. You're doing okay. And everything that you're learning right now is going to help you when you're 40. And if young people can just remember that everything is a brilliant opportunity, as long as you keep that perspective that it's an opportunity to teach you something, that something good is going to come from it, then you're golden. And just keep taking that step, because the pavement will rise to meet you.
I know you have the documentaries. I know there's a lot of videos online, but if folks wanted to catch up with Beth Troutman video-wise with Give Hope Global, where's the best way for them to contact you?
Give Hope Global has a YouTube channel that you can search for. It's just Give Hope Global. And then they have a website, givehopeglobal.org, where you can go and sponsor children who are at the orphanage there in Haiti. For me, I do have a YouTube channel with the videos from Haiti are there. And then there are some, things from right this minute, and, all the work that I've done there too, which is just, my YouTube channel is just Beth Troutman. But you can follow me on social media, on Instagram at Beth Troutman, on Twitter, which is at Beth_Troutman, and then on Facebook, which is facebook.com/The Beth Troutman. And you can, follow the work that I'm doing and see what I'm up to, and hopefully you'll find some inspiration of plowing through your fear and living a life on purpose, living the life that you really want, rather than the life that someone tells you that you should want.
It has really, truly been a blast, not only getting a chance to meet you at the Azalea Festival Gala, which I really, truly, that was a beautiful evening and really was a lot of fun.
Really
but to kind of look into your past and to look into some of the things and how we do have a couple of things in common, not just being television news anchors, but Martin Sheen and my mom passed away from ovarian cancer as well. And so we have that tie together, and knowing that you're doing some of the things that make your heart swell up with pride really is kind of fun for somebody, even on the other side of North Carolina, to see and watch.
Oh, well, you're so kind to say that. And I absolutely loved getting to reconnect with you at the Azalea Festival, in a different setting where we weren't news anchors, following the gubernatorial debate, but to actually get to give you a hug and to get to know you as a human being. And you are lovely, and you are so good at your job. Oh my gosh, I'm so impressed by you in this interview, and I've just been impressed by you in the times that I've been around you. So thank you for the compliments, because it means a lot to me coming from someone as impressive as you are. So I appreciate that.
Big thanks to Beth Troutman for sparing some of her time and joining us on this this week's podcast. Again, she's all over social media. She's on Twitter, she's on Facebook, and she has that YouTube channel, and you can see many of her videos right there on YouTube. And if you want to learn more about her efforts with the new organization, it's givehopeglobal.org. Next week, one of the most recognizable voices and faces in the entire area, Brandon Hickman. Well, you know him better as Big B.
I was a kid. I was the band geek in the class, with the big trombone, awkward, trying to get off the bus with my book bag and my instrument. So it was always, hey, radio or music, it was the thing that kind of made you, okay, he knows what he's talking about. Yeah. So he's kind of cool. He's all right. Yeah. But I was still the awkward guy. So that made me, feel a little bit better about myself.
Don't miss Big B next week right here on our podcast. If you know someone who you think would be a good interview for an upcoming episode, please send me an email and let me know who it is. jevans@wect.com. And I'm asking you, please subscribe to the podcast too. That helps us with our numbers, and you'll get a notification as soon as the new podcast goes live. And if you leave me a rating or a review for this week's episode or any other ones, and you send me a screenshot by email, well, you can be the lucky listener we pick at random, and we'll send you one of those great WECT travel mugs. I'm John Evans. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of One on One.